Hello, hello, hello. How is everyone? I see some of our regulars have joined. It's good to see you guys. We'll get started in just about 2 to 3 minutes. So for those of you watching, let me ask a question. Are you able to see the video and the PowerPoint or just the PowerPoint? You can answer me in chat. Okay. I can't see what I look like, so. There we go. Okay, that should do. Mary, you should be able to see both. Okay, good. Okay. All right. Okay, ladies. So, as per usual, I am on Facebook live for our facilitators. Hi, Jean. Thanks for joining. And here in the webinar. This is recorded and it's posted to our website. So if you also wanted to go back and watch the prior webinars, you can do that. They are right now housed under resources, but they're going to be moved so that all webinars are housed under webinars, whether they're previous or the current season, so that that'll be a better resource for you. And the webinars are free to anybody that you want to share them with. If you want to invite them to your friends and family, if you think, oh, my so-and-so needs to hear this, go ahead and send that to them. It's something that we are providing as part of the Mending the Soul ministry to help people get information about trauma and become more trauma informed and heal even outside of groups. And for facilitators, we hope that it's helpful for you in kind of a continuing education mentality. So we're going to go ahead and get started today. Today is about friendships. This is probably one of the things that I see most in the counseling room as a roadblock to healing. So you can do a lot of work, but if and until you establish real connection with other people, you're not really using any of that healing, right? Like it stays kind of stagnant. And there's something about relationships, deep, lasting relationships, that is just healing in a way that nothing else is. Stephen Celesta liked to say, trauma happens in the context of relationship and healing needs to as well. So whether that's the therapy room or a small group or beyond, I really honestly think that once you have healed from a lot of the really hard stuff, there is endless amounts of healing that can take place within friendship and community. So that's what I hope to talk about today. Hope to give you some background, biblical knowledge, clinical knowledge, and then also to build on practical skills. So I think we should just start with what is love and what is friendship, right? When we have trauma, a lot of times we develop some weird ideas about what relating should look like. And I'm just going to go back to scripture here. A sweet friendship refreshes the soul is definitely true. And then these are kind of the backstops of any friendship that you're going to have. 1 Corinthians 4-7, which is read at almost every wedding that's in the church. If you don't even have to really be church to know this. Love is patient, love is kind. I think if you take these qualities and apply them to the people in your life, they should be true for the most part. We're all human and make mistakes, but if you are allowing someone into your inner circle, these should be qualities that those people have. And then be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you. So we're going to use those as the guiding principles for our relationships. I hear a lot among church people, I'm good. Jesus is all I need. I don't really need other people. I know relationships are hard. I know I should be satisfied with just having God in my life. A lot of people that feel like they aren't good at relationships because of their trauma, they think, well, I guess I just have to be satisfied with Jesus. And here's the thing. Jesus is your sufficiency for salvation and your sustenance for spiritual living. He is all of those things and more. He never intended to be your only friend. That is not the created design. It is not how he wants you to relate. And guess what? Jesus had friends, and he had different kinds of friends. And so if we look at scripture, we see that Jesus traveled with approximately 70 to 90 people. And that was pretty normal back then for rabbis to travel with a group of people. If you think about maybe what you learned in history about Aristotle and Plato, they had schools of philosophy. The same was true for rabbis. They had followers that would follow them, and their responsibility was to teach those people. Sorry, I'm going to adjust so you can see my hand motions. So he had this large group. We see in Luke 10 that he sends out 70 to go and evangelize, to go and preach. And it sounds like he kept his 12 closest with him when he sent those 70 or 72, in some places it's recorded. But those 70 traveled with him, and were probably the equivalent to what we would call like a small church. So they were friends of his, they ate with him, they partook with him, they fellowshiped with him. He related with them. These are probably the people he needed a break from when he got in the boat and went across into the lake, right? We've all been there. And then there were the 12, and we all know the 12 from scripture, the 12 disciples. And these were his good buddies, and they lived together, and they hung out together, and they ate together, and they traveled together. And then there were the 3. And these were his closest friends. And we also know that he was close to Lazarus. He wept when Lazarus died. So we know Jesus did friendship, and Jesus did friendship well. And so if we are to be imitators of Christ, we need to learn to do that, and also acknowledge a need for communion and companionship. That is an intrinsic need. So I talk here about relating and intimacy as present before creation. We're created in God's image. God is not one single solitary, isolated person. He is 3 persons in one. And so even in the person of Jesus, there is not isolation. As creations of a relational creator, relationships are an intrinsic need that we have for emotional, physical, and spiritual health. I see a few of you jumped in late. If you have questions, go ahead and type those into the Q&A or into the chat. I'm going to try to watch it all. Open my chat so you can see that come in. And then if you're on Facebook, I'll answer that stuff at the end because it's hard for me to watch too many windows at the same time. So there's a lot of research around loneliness. You may have heard some of this. Years ago, if you're old enough, you might remember that orphanages in the Eastern Bloc countries like the Ukraine, Russia, were just so full of kids that those kids were oftentimes just left without any human contact, and they resorted to like self-harm in their cribs because they were so lonely that they needed to feel something. And so they would bang their heads against their cribs, but their brain development was extremely arrested to the point that if and when they ever did get adopted, those family situations were really difficult and not successful because they had not developed the parts of their brains necessary for a relationship because of the extreme isolation and lack of human contact. So we know that human contact is necessary. If you consider that a lot of times trauma victims are extremely depressed and anxious and relationships are difficult because they've been hurt, it only exacerbates these things, or starts to build, and then it gets even harder to make friendships, right? Studies have shown that isolation in children creates an increase in stress hormones that create increased risk for physical and mental illness in adulthood. Isolation in childhood can impact the development of the prefrontal cortex. So that's this part of your brain that's responsible for executive function and cognitive function, your reasoning. So some of the behavioral things you might see in these children are some obstinate defiant disorders, and in adulthood this will look like the inability to connect with other people, aggression, violence. I also saw some research when I was preparing for this that showed that mice in isolation showed the following behaviors. They were increasingly aggressive towards other mice. They showed a persistent fear. So that fight-flight mechanism, theirs never turned off. There was hypervigilance that showed itself through hypersensitivity to threatening stimuli. When encountering a threatening stimulus, these mice that have been socially isolated would remain frozen much longer than a mouse that was not isolated. And there are a bunch of other things that that study showed, but those are kind of the keys. And I think this is true in people too. I think we see that the longer that you are isolated, the longer that you go without friendship, the longer that you go without connection, the harder it is to make those connections. And the more hypervigilant you are, the more you're watching to see what the interaction is like. You're reading the facial expressions, you're reading the emotions of the other person. Are they judging you? Do they like you? Are they safe, right? So the less contact, the harder it is to make that contact. Carrie, yes, once it's recorded, there will be a link posted to the webinar page, and you can direct people there. That's probably the best way to do it. It'll be in a couple of days. It takes a couple of days for it to upload and all of that. But yes, you can share it. And I am going to try and post it to the Mending the Soul public Facebook page if that's helpful. Okay, so how does trauma impact our ability to relate? So PTSD, CPTSD has a direct impact on the brain's ability to determine safety. So we talk about this a little bit in Mending the Soul, that when you have chronic trauma, persistent trauma, or relational trauma, it tells the brain, like, beware, right? You're in fight or flight all the time. And because of this, it impacts the ability to establish trust, establish closeness, or even to participate in healthy conflict. So this could be demonstrated by, when I'm hurt, I shut down and I run. I don't communicate at all. Or when I'm hurt, I jump in and I fight. I go on the attack, and it doesn't take much to get me there. So I know I experienced that before I had healing, and I definitely know that I saw it in other people. The other thing that can happen is because of depression and anxiety, there's a loss of interest in social activity. So there's not even really a desire. There's this intense feeling of being other, of not belonging. I hear this all the time. An inability to relax in the company of others, uncomfortable in one's own skin, feeling numb or dead. So this is all stuff we talk about in Mending the Soul Basic, right? These are just some things that I've had people say to me. I'm uninteresting. Nobody's interested in anything I have to say. I have nothing to offer. I don't have anything to bring to a relationship. And this really speaks to that deadness, that feeling of worthlessness, numbness, like there's just nothing here. I'm completely disconnected from myself. People don't like me, or people wouldn't like me if they knew me. And other women are mean to me. So women, ladies, we struggle with this big time. I can't even tell you how many women have said to me, I just can't be friends with women. I'm fine being friends with men. I just can't be friends with women. No, you just are hurt. And so let's heal the hurt, and then let's establish some relationships with women. I think that this comes from a lot of wounding from mothers. I think that we women say things about other women that are not necessarily good or right, that is just perpetuated by really bad cultural norms. But this is definitely a lie that a lot of women carry around that is damaging. Women need other women, and we need to learn to be kind and non-judgmental to other women. So if that's something that you're repeating in your head, pay attention, because that is not true. You can be friends with other women. And women, good girlfriends are the best kinds of friends to have around, especially once you're married and your husband can't beat a good girlfriend, right? Like there are just those times you need a good girlfriend. I want to quickly talk about trauma bonding, because this is something that can sometimes happen in a group. It definitely happens for survivors who have not really stepped out of victim mentality into survivor mentality. So trauma bonding can be a couple of different things. It can be in a, like, let's say, for example, a domestic violence situation, that you are so bonded to your abuser that you find yourself caretaking and helping your abuser, maybe even helping them abuse you. And that's a trauma bond, right? It can happen with siblings who were in an abusive home, that the bond between the two of them is the trauma. And so it's oftentimes, we see this when foster kids are placed or adopted, that it's actually less beneficial for them to be placed together because of that bond. And so oftentimes they're separated because they're healthier apart, because the bond is not a normal sibling bond. It can be seen in friendship, when friendship is established surrounding trauma. So I meet Susan, and Susan and I meet for coffee, and our whole conversation is about trauma. And the next time we meet, our whole conversation is about our trauma. And we never move past that. So the only thing we're connecting on is this really painful story that's connecting us. It might even be a shared story. Sometimes it's establishing a connection that looks the same as the one from our abuser. So I might have dated Adam, and Adam was physically abusive and emotionally abusive, and it was a roller coaster, as all domestic violence situations are, right? And then that ends and I move on and I end up with Bob. And while Bob doesn't hit me, it's this same roller coaster. And so my brain has likened this emotional roller coaster to being what intimacy is. It identifies it as that. And so I feel like I'm in a healthy, loving relationship, but really I don't have a connection. I have a trauma bond to that person. I'm comfortable in this uncomfortable state. This graphic that I have here says traumatic bonding occurs due to the cyclical nature of abuse and the emotional roller coaster the victim goes through due to abuse. The alternating phase of reward and punishment creates a powerful emotional bond that is hard to change. Questions about this? Or anything I've said so far? You can use the chat or the Q&A button. So I use this a lot to, like, when people are like, well, how many friends do I need? Because I have one really good friend that lives in Nova Scotia. And I say, well, you're going to need more than that, because we all need more than that. So we're going to use Jesus as our example. And we're going to say this larger group can be innumerable, right? Like, we don't know how many this is. This is the people we work with. This is the people, this is the green group, right? This big outer circle. It's people we work with, people we go to church with, people we're in class with. It can be friends of friends that we're kind of acquainted with, the other moms at preschool drop off. It can be my knitting club where I'm not super close to people, anything like that. The next size group, the red group, is medium size. And this is the 70 that we talked about a little earlier. There's moderate intimacy here. These are friends that you might invite to your wedding. These are close coworkers that you might go out to lunch with, but you're not necessarily going to have them to your house. These people do not know a whole lot about your trauma story. These people do not know a whole lot about your marriage. They know that you're married, right? They don't know. They'll know you're pregnant. They might not be invited to the baby shower. You might go to the movies with somebody in this group, but you're not going to spend a lot of time sharing super intimate stuff, okay? The smaller group is the 12, and this is the blue group. And these are your close friends. These are pretty intimate friends. These are people that you'd have stay the night in your home. If you were traveling, you might stay with them. These are people that you might go on a trip with because it's that comfortable. These people probably know when your birthday is. They for sure came to your wedding. They were for sure at your baby shower. If you're a guy, you'd grab a beer and watch football with these guys. You would, what do you guys do? You might play basketball on a Saturday afternoon with these guys. You might even go hunting with these guys, okay? These are folks who know the basics of your story. They might not know all of your feelings or the things that you're still struggling with, but they know your story. They know you have a story. And then we have the smaller group that's like 1 to 3 people. You're not going to have 15 people in your white circle because that means you're not being healthy with your boundaries. So it's really important that you have these concentric circles, these different levels of intimacy in your friend groups. Everybody should not know everything, because then you're not protecting yourself. So the small group of 1 to 3 is your closest friends and your spouse. And sometimes people actually don't even have that level of intimacy with their spouse. And if that's the case, then we really have work to do in terms of our own healing, maybe even couples work with a therapist. These are the people that you can call at 2 a.m. You might call this person when you're in the middle of a panic attack. These are the people that come without judgment, with food, with a cup of coffee if you need it. I know one of my girlfriends, when I was pregnant, every pregnancy, if I said, man, I'm craving garlic fries, within 20 minutes, I had garlic fries in my door, because that was for gifting. And she's the one I called when I had food cravings. So that's who these people are. They are also the people that know your story. They know how you feel about your story. They have compassion on your story and on you. This is your inner circle. These are your 3. These are the 3 that Jesus took to the Transfiguration for the Sermon on the Mount. So that's how close these people are. So this is the goal, is to develop, and obviously I hope it goes without saying that I don't want you counting your friends. I do think that in that center circle, the goal should be to move people that are trustworthy and safe from the outer circles as they demonstrate safety, so that you do have 1 to 3 people that are safe and trustworthy, that know you and see you in that inner circle. So where do we start? How do we do this? Healing is the first thing, because if you don't do that, you're not going to be safe for anybody, and your friendships are going to fall apart. I would start with mending the soul. I think that's a good place to start if you haven't done that. There's a chapter on isolation and brokenness that is really helpful, especially if this is an area that's hard for you. If you have complex or chronic trauma in your past, definitely therapy. And I would say if you are looking for therapy, and that is the case for you, that you have chronic trauma, I would look for someone that specializes in one of these models, which EMDR, sensory motor, or somatic experiencing are especially helpful for trauma survivors. And then work on any healing that you still have to do. I highly recommend the book Safe People as a follow-up to Mending the Soul. You can do your healing work and still maybe you're not a safe person for other people because of the core lessons you learned about how to relate to others. And Safe People is good to help you challenge some of the perceptions and beliefs you have about relationships, including whether or not you are participating in behavior that makes other people unsafe. I'll just give you a personal example. When I read that, I realized that the trauma bond between my mother and I had created this negative interaction cycle, and I was behaving in an unsafe way as an adult child for my mother, and that was challenging for me. So the next thing is to get out there, and this is really hard. So we relate in a time when most people were on the internet, interact on the internet. You keep in touch with your family on the internet, you keep in touch with your friends on the internet, you go to webinars on the internet, right? And we even have Mending the Soul groups on the internet. I'm going to suggest that you actually have to be able to be near warm bodies, that if you're a hugger and you need a hug, that your good friends would be able to hug you, that you would be able to see their face, that if their eyes well up with tears, that would also be a part of your exchange in person. To meet people, here are some ideas. Classes are a really good place to start, because you might be figuring out what you find fun and enjoyable, or working on a skill that you already know you find fun and enjoyable. And chances are there's going to be people that are like you there, your kind of people. So some ideas: art class, yoga, woodworking, creative writing seminars, cooking, dance, community college classes, a Bible study at church, a MOPS group or a men's group, Celebrate Recovery. I want to caution the Celebrate Recovery only because of the stuff we talked about with trauma bonds, that can actually, and I've seen this happen a lot in that particular ministry, that the bond becomes a lot like AA, where you are only talking about that. That might be a place to meet someone, but if the friendship doesn't go beyond the steps and working through your issues, then that's probably not a healthy way to develop friendship. And then experiment. So you meet someone, you think that they're similar to you and you like them and you want to get to know them better. Ask them out to coffee. Ask them if they want to go out for dinner. Put together a group. If it's intimidating to ask one person, ask 3 of the ladies. Say, hey, I'd really like to try this new restaurant. Would you like to go with me? Or I'm going to do a mom's movie night and I'd like to invite all of you. Or I'm going to join a basketball league. Do you want to join me? Another thing that I use with a lot of my younger clients is meetup groups. So Meetup is a website or an app, I guess, nowadays. And there are meetup groups for literally everything. So there's hiking meetup groups, cinema meetup groups, creative writing meetup groups, tons of different meetup groups. And that can be really, really helpful in helping you meet people like you. Obviously, be safe. Don't just go to someone's house. And meet in a public place. Don't tell people your personal information until they have shown trustworthiness. Some other things I put on here is like dad's groups and divorce care, which a lot of times churches have those groups as well. And the last thing I have here is treasure the gift of your intimate friendship. So I kind of touched on this when I said you should not have 15 people in that center circle. That center circle is sacred. Your intimate friendship is a gift to others, and their friendship is a gift to you. And so guard your heart and save it for the people that really are going to appreciate it. If you find that you're pouring into other people and no one is pouring back, I correlate that to casting pearls before swine. Save it. Hang on to it. Be acquaintances for a while and see if the friendship grows. Yes, they do, Carrie. So Carrie says meetup groups exist for olders too. They absolutely do. I think meetup groups have actually been around for a really long time. I think it's just morphed and changed. I have clients who have really found it useful, the meetup groups online. So yes, treasure the gift of your friendship. Don't just throw it out there and see what sticks. Take your time to develop intimacy and to make sure that the person is safe and trustworthy. So the inevitable, what if I get hurt? Well, start from the outset. You're absolutely going to get hurt because people hurt people. Not just hurt people, but people hurt people. I always tell premarital clients, if you're getting married thinking that this person is never going to hurt you, you should probably think that over again. You will absolutely get hurt in any relationship you're going to have because we're sinners and we hurt people. You are going to hurt people. And so the question is not what if you get hurt, but what's going to happen if you get hurt. The very first thing that I think is important is to decide whether or not the behavior that hurt you is a pattern of behavior for this person or a single solitary mistake. So Shirley didn't show up for the coffee date you had. You texted and she didn't answer. Is this going to be every time you have a coffee date, every third time you have a coffee date? Or did she get in a car accident? Or did she get overwhelmed with her schedule and it's a one-time thing that won't happen again? So figuring that out might actually take 2 coffee dates, right? But don't jump to, I'm worthless, she doesn't want to be with me. Don't jump to, I can't be friends with women, they're unreliable. So you want to challenge those negative cognitions and actually look at the evidence and decide if this is a pattern of behavior or if it was a single incident that actually needs to be afforded some grace. Was the mistake a character flaw or an opportunity to be vulnerable? So I can think of another example. When I was early on in my healing, I have a really good friend who is always on the go. And she would always try to schedule me between things. And so she'd be like, well, when do you want to meet? And when are we going to be done? And I always felt very rushed and felt like I wasn't a priority. Like she wanted to move on to the next thing. That's my stuff. It might be hers too, but I should also be able to just meet for an hour if that's the time that she has and that works for me. So I had to have that conversation of, hey, can you schedule me at the end? Because I feel really pressured and rushed by being slotted between 2 things. And that took a lot of vulnerability for me to say, because what if she said no? And I liked this person and she was a lot of fun, but I was vulnerable and I asked for that and she listened, and it's actually really helped grow our friendship. And And what it said to her is, I actually really value my time with you, and I don't want to rush it. I enjoy my time with you. I value it. Can we schedule a time that we're not limited by a busy schedule? So that I would have also learned very quickly if that was a character flaw for her, that she was avoiding intimacy by making sure she wasn't with someone for too long. So test those things out and watch and pay attention and see what happens. And you'll feel it. Like you will feel, oh, that response didn't feel good. So I'm going to note that and pay attention to that. And then I mentioned this previously, are you a safe person? So make sure, I would again highly recommend reading Safe People by Cloud and Townsend. How do you react when someone says that you've hurt them? So it's easy to judge the reactions of others when we bring our hurts to the table. But as survivors, are we overreacting or underreacting when someone says that our behavior is hurtful? Are we apologizing? Are we seeking reconciliation? Or are we resting in that defensive mode and unable to really acknowledge the hurt that we've caused and make it right? And then how do I be healthy when I'm hurt? So this is, the hurt has happened and now what do I do? So the big thing is healthy communication. Working up the guts to say, hey, when you did X, I was really hurt. And I think anybody that's ever had to say that knows that requires a lot of vulnerability, because now you're not only being vulnerable that you're hurt, but you are opening yourself up for the person to say, oh, I know I meant to hurt you. Or, no, I didn't. Or anything else that doesn't acknowledge your pain, which can be very painful, almost sometimes more painful than the first hurt. And then here's the thing. If you healthfully communicate your feelings and emotions and the person reacts in a really bad way, in an unhealthy way, you have your answer. That person doesn't belong in your inner circle. They might not even belong in your outer circle. They get voted off the island, as I say. So distinguish those patterns from this isolated incident, or it's a pattern of behavior, in which case that person might be an abusive person. It might not be a good friendship for you. Sometimes people that have similar wounding can really just bump up against the soft spots in your life. They might bump up against your wounding in a really painful way. And that person could be a really sweet, nice, healthy person. They're just not a good fit for you. This is true in dating, which we're going to talk about next time. And it's true in friendship as well. But sometimes the wounding is just too triggering for the two of you. And you can love them from a distance. What are your boundaries going to be around time, around communication, around intimacy? You should definitely be thinking about that. What are you going to share about your story? So this is especially true for people that have been isolated for a long time. There can be an awkwardness to those initial stages when you're not sure what you have to share other than your trauma. And this is why it's important that you do things. Whether it's you're reading a book, or you're knitting, or you're sewing, or you're playing basketball, or video games, or whatever it is, develop a sense of what you are, who you are, what do you do, what's interesting to you. Maybe it's watching science shows. Whatever it is, have something to talk about other than your trauma when you're first meeting people. And it's okay if it's rehearsed. 100% okay if you rehearse it in the beginning. In fact, I would say if you struggle with anxiety, rehearse it, because then it flows more naturally. And then what are you expecting from the relationship or the friendship? If you don't have any friendships right now, and you are going to be seeking new friendships, you cannot expect these people that you meet on day one to treat you like they treat their best friends. That takes a long time. And you have to earn their trust and demonstrate yourself trustworthy and safe, just like you're expecting them to. So take your time. For every success, pat yourself on the back. You went to the party, you went to the meetup group, you went to the Bible study, you said your rehearsed piece, you watched people, you identified people that you thought were interesting, and it was a success. Or you learned from it. That group wasn't for me. I actually don't find those things interesting, and I'm going to try something different. How to spot a potential friend. So equity. this person seems as interested in friendship as you are. So this is not the person at the party that is looking away from you the whole time you're talking. This is not the person at the party that's looking over your shoulder to see if somebody else is more interesting. This is the person that looks you in the eye, that laughs at your jokes, that thinks you're interesting, and that you feel that way about too. This person matches your effort and attention. So it's not you texting 7 times before you get together. It's the same reciprocating communication. This person listens to you and you are able and willing to listen to them. If you tell this person, oh, my mom has cancer and I have to meet her for chemo, they remember that the next time they see you. Kindness. This is not about being nice. This is about being kind. And the difference is this: niceness is almost like a form of tolerance, whereas kindness requires a little bit of sacrifice on the part of the other person. And then I put in here honesty and fun, laughter, and play. I think as survivors, we oftentimes neglect the necessity of fun. I think we think that life, because it has been for us, really, to be honest, needs to be serious. And sometimes we forget how to have fun and play. And if you can find someone that you like that is really good at playing, whether it's a sport or a craft or going to the movies or dancing or whatever it is, that is a gift that you cannot pass by, in my opinion. I think a playful friend is a really, really good friend to have. And then how do you demonstrate safety? So this is getting repetitive at this point, and I know that, but I think it's really important. You need to be a good listener. You need to do it away with the criticism, even the criticism that takes place in here. So as a person's talking, be really aware of the voices in your head, because it's the same voice that criticizes you. It's your inner critic criticizing them. Try to silence that as much as possible. Say no to gossip. As you're developing friendships and new people come in over here, don't tell this person's stuff to these people. Respect their boundaries. Don't push into their boundaries. And then forgive and seek forgiveness. One mistake is not a reason to write people off. Give people a chance to be human, because if you do, they'll give you a chance to be human. And that's it. So questions about that, and then I have a few big things to share with you. And I'm going to try to pull up Facebook too at the same time. Any questions? You can use the chat button or the Q&A button. Anybody? Does this stuff come up in your groups? Facilitator questions. I'm going to meet you guys on the facilitator page in, I don't make my PowerPoints available, Suzanne, just you can, if you watch the recording, you can use them, but I don't give them out. Sorry about that. Facilitator questions are, I'll address those on the Mending the Soul Facebook page, or the Mending the Soul Facilitator page. But general questions about the topic I can answer in here. Does the abuser bond to the person being traumatized? Yeah, for sure. I think that's sometimes why it's a hard cycle to break, right? That's why it's hard for a domestic violence situation to heal and for it to be a healthy marriage, because it becomes addicting, the whole thing, all of it. There's a payoff there. Kath, I think it's a sign that you've done a good job. They've experienced acceptance. Kathy says, my participants don't want to leave once we finish group. It's a really good time to introduce them to something like this. This might be something you get together and watch this webinar the last time. They're probably afraid because it's the first time in their lives they've ever been accepted by somebody. They've told their story and they haven't been judged. So good job to you for providing that environment. And now, little birdies, it's time to fly. So it would be unhealthy if you stayed in contact with them. You want to encourage them, if they have established friendship in the context of that group, stay in touch, but warn them about the trauma bond. The group context is about abuse. So have they built relationship outside of that? And how are they going to do that? How can they do that? I would recommend Safe People to anybody. You don't have to have done Mending the Soul to do it. I think it's really hard to be a safe person if you don't do your own healing, but it is phenomenal. And it's a short read. Boundaries is big. Safe People is, I mean, it's maybe 8 short chapters. It's a very easy read, and it's not super heady. Any other questions? Boundaries is also a good book. And Kathy, Kath, you can also recommend, like, if you guys really like each other and you want to keep healing, read some books together, do a book club, do Safe People, do Boundaries, do Brené Brown's Shame book. Keep working on your healing together. Anything else, ladies? These are really good questions. Thank you. All right, so let me share some new information with you. We have, for all of you, I'm going to copy a URL into the chat window here. It's called A Visible Difference. We have launched this new curriculum. It is, I would call it Mending the Soul Light. So this is our new curriculum that's kind of an intro to healing and intro to trauma. So for somebody that maybe isn't ready to take on the group setting, or if there's not a group available, if you run groups at church, or if you're watching this and you're curious what I'm talking about when I say Mending the Soul, this is a good place to start. It will help you identify whether or not you have trauma. It'll help you identify what trauma is and kind of just prepare you for what a group might look like. Sorry, I'm reading questions. See, I can't do 2 things at once. So this website, it is the Mending the Soul website. It's, but this particular thing, Discover under A Visible Difference, is really helpful. That is kind of where we're funneling people prior to Mending the Soul Basic if there isn't a group available to them right away. So I wanted to let you guys know about that. Also, we have raised over $36,000 for this month's campaign, which we are doing in lieu of our annual fundraiser. So we're doing the November campaign, and then there's a December campaign. The good news about November, if you haven't given and you still want to, is that we have a donor that is giving a $50,000 match. So for every dollar you give, it's $2. So if you have not donated to Mending the Soul ever, I want to tell you a little bit about what your money goes to. So book sales, I know this was a question I had. I'm like, our books are beautiful and they're not cheap. What am I paying for if I'm not supporting Mending the Soul with the books? That does support Mending the Soul to a certain extent, but it's not our entire budget. We do a ton of work in Africa. In fact, I think our African facilitators outnumber our American facilitators right now. Steve and Celesta have created a Mending the Soul book that uses African culture. They work with refugees, former child soldiers, and women that have been abused as a result of warfare there. And their work is really fantastic. We also do trainings in churches and speak and hold different things across the country. We're developing new curriculums all the time. So all of that costs money, and I highly encourage you, if you feel led, even $10. And if you could do $10 a month, that's 2 cups of coffee the way I order my coffee. And you can do a monthly giving thing, be hugely beneficial to us. So I highly encourage you to do that. You go to mendingthesoul.org and click on give, and you can see your money do wonderful things in the lives of hurting people. Also, when you purchase books, when we work with street kids or when we work with women that have been trafficked, oftentimes we scholarship those women. And so part of your proceeds do help, part of your paying does help women who are not able to do it on their own, do it. And your giving would support that as well. So I'm going to keep mentioning it because I'm passionate about it. Our goal is $100,000 this month. We're not there. And the last day of this initiative is December 3rd. So I'm going to challenge you to just give in the interest of the season. Susan, I've read Safe People and found it super helpful. I was wondering if I should suggest it to the ladies that I'm talking with. I would actually send them through a Visible Difference. If they haven't done the group, send them through that first, then do the group, and then they can read Safe People. If they're women that you're vetting and working with, send them through Visible Difference first. And that URL is in the chat window if you click on chat. Any other questions? All right, feel free to email me or catch me on the Mending the Soul Facilitator page if you're a facilitator. If you tag me on the public page, I'll check that. I don't manage that page, so you'll have to tag me if you have a question on that one. Okay. All right, ladies, have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining, and gentlemen, if there are any on the line. Mostly ladies. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.